we're looking at extrude, loft, revolve and planar. Very useful set of tools for making more complex shapes inside Mare, and they all rely on being able to draw single lines rather than shapes. So where did I get these lines that you can see in the foreground? Where did I get these from and how did I make them? So that's the first thing to do, and then we'll look at the different ways that we can revolve and play around with these things. So what I did is, obviously it's inside the create menu as always, so we go to the create menu, and down here you've got a CV and EP curve. Now that stands for control vertex and edit point curves, and so in this case we'll go for control vertex CV curve. And whenever you use this tool, let's just give you an example here. It looks like I'm going up the page. In fact, whenever you use one of these tools, it lays it flat down on the grid that's active at the time. So if I want to do a line that's going upwards, let's just Control Z that. So I press enter to complete the line and press Control Z to go back. So whenever I want to go up the page or up the screen rather than flat on this plane, I need to go and find, the front view or the side view, and then when I start clicking and drawing, there it is, it will draw the curve directly up on that grid. You can see how it's centralized, and I can move that into the position I want. So that's how to generate curves or lines that you can then edit and loft and play around with. I can also create Nurbs basic circles and squares. I've been using the circles here as a template or a starting point to generate tubes. So let's have a look at this. We'll start over at the far side here. What's going on here? So the first thing I did was I drew a circle, and then within that circle I made a planar, which is this effect. Now how have I done that? Up here you need to change your menu set to surfaces. So this is a new one for us, surfaces. And although we're going to generate a polygon from this shape, we're using a surfaces tool. Here's the 4 tools we're looking at today: extrude, planar, loft and revolve, and we're just going to have a look at planar. So let's just click on the options, and you can clearly see some options here. You can see that we can generate some polygons, linear, cubic, polygons. It's up to you what you do. You can see here that it's got triangles. I always work into quads. I think quads are slightly more useful. The reason we have triangular modelling is if you want a structure that is less likely to deform, so the rigid body of a car, something like that, that's less likely to get deformed, that's when you'd use triangles instead of quads. Something like a face or something organic, you'd always want to use quads so that they could deform without negative things happening to textures on the surfaces. So I'm just going to go to quads. I'm going to click apply, and you'll see that this planar is attached. This surface is now generated across that circle there. So yeah, you can see that whenever you generate an object, the control point for that object is based at the center of the grid. So if you're wondering where is the motion, where is the move tool gone, because I'm on the move tool or rotate tool, where is it? Well, it's at the center of the grid. When you generate a new object, that's where it puts the pivot point. You can move that pivot point by pressing insert on the keyboard, insert, and move it along and centralize it using the different handles, so you can centralize it as you want. And this is the outliner here, and the outliner helps you organize and find objects and parts of your models, and it also helps animators later on to control what's happening. And one of those tools is a group, and this is a group of objects here that I've made by pressing Control G. So if I just generate a couple of objects, I'll just show you how that works. So there's one object, and I'll just press Control D to duplicate it, move that across. So I've got 2 objects there. Let's just close that down so it doesn't confuse people. So I've got 2 objects and I want to group them together. I could parent them by middle click dragging one over another, so that is now the child of the other one, or I could group them together as well. So let's just middle click that one, drag that right to the bottom, lift that ungroups them, that unparents them from each other. I select both of them. You can see how easy it is to select them in here instead of in the surface by drawing marquees around here. So and I can press Control and G, and that will group them together. And that's exactly what I've done. So I'm going to delete those. pressing delete. That's exactly what I've done with these 4 groups here, so that I could easily go and find these parts during this tutorial. So there's my parts for my planar. Let's have a look at the Revolve. The Revolve is next. I'm not going to go through all the options. They're basically the same in each of these, obviously with slight changes depending on what's going on. You can see the kind of shape that you can have with a Revolve. Now if I select this object here, you'll notice that the pivot point I've centralized onto here, so that as it revolves it makes this kind of vase shape. I've deliberately not rotated it all the way around 360 degrees, so you can see the gap in the surface there. And you can see the kind of surface that's been generated here. This is a Nurbs surface, so let's just close that down and go and have a look at the options for that. So surfaces, and we're looking at Revolve now, and inside the options there you can pretty much go through this and work it out for yourself. I can click on polygons, or I could have Nurbs, and you can see that because we're revolving, we can revolve it around different axis if we want to, or we can have a free revolving. We can rotate it around the pivot of the object, or a different preset pivot that you've set in. And there's loads of options in here to play around with and just have some fun with and see what you can do and how to revolve. So that's revolving. Just hit revolve and it would happen. I'll click apply and the option box will stay open. Okay, all you have to do is make sure that you have this line selected when you hit apply. It will make that change for you. Okay. Let's just close that down. The next one, particularly useful. This one is the Loft. Okay, so I'm in the Loft group here, and you can see what I've done here is I've generated a number of different circles, and those circles have gone up 1, 2, 3, 4, and they go up in that number. So if I just go and have a look here, you can see that they're numbered in this order: 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's important that they are in that order, and that they are in that order height-wise. Otherwise, when we do the Loft, you'll find that funny things happen with the surface jumping up and down in the scene. Just look how difficult it is to select all those circles without picking up something else in the background by mistake. Now I could add those to layers and then make them templates so that I didn't select them, or I can just select over here those circles, and then I'm ready to start the Loft. So I've selected them all. It does matter what order you select them in, so make sure you select them in a sensible order, and then go to Loft, and in the options there you can see that you've got again the same option of sticking it on a polygon or having a Nerve surface, and you've got all sorts of options in here that you can play around with and see what happens. And there I've got my Nerve surface, in this case a candlestick kind of image there. So very easy to generate multiple things. Now just have a look what happens when I resize some of these circles, because what you might not have realised is that there's a connection that the computer makes when it makes the Loft that stays in place. And that's really useful, especially you could imagine if I was an animator animating this object at the moment. It makes a really nice, easy way to generate some fun animations. So, so some good stuff there. There is a way to get away from that. If you don't want that link anymore, if you don't want it to be deformed, simply duplicate the object, and the duplicated object won't keep that same restriction on it that the original had. Okay, so that won't animate with the others. Okay, so that's just a way to get away from that if you want to. The last one we're going to look at is probably the most useful in my eyes, extruding. And we've looked at extruding before. We've looked at extruding with a face, which you can select. Let's just duplicate this, Control D, and I'll just move that across. You can see that. So it's going through the surface there. And we've looked at extruding before, where you select faces, and what I didn't show you before is that you can actually select a face and a path, and using the polygon menu tool you can actually extrude along a path, and then you can change how many divisions there are in that, and it will follow the path. This is slightly different. This is extruding with a profile shape. Let's just get rid of those. With a profile shape, so here's my profile shape, the circle at the bottom, and a path, and selecting both together, the computer works out what it wants to do there, or what you want it to do there. So let's just have a quick look. So I need to go back into surfaces, and in surfaces I'm going to the what am I doing? Extrude, and inside the options there, you've got lots of options. You've got tube, at path. We can do polygons or Nurbs. Hit apply, and it will generate the shape for you. I've just shown a little example here because this is a classic example of where a Nurb surface is a much more useful shape than a polygon. Just look at the number of divisions that the polygon had to be generated for the polygon when they made this, and then look at the same thing for the Nurb. Now it might look as smart if I press 3. It might look as smart as the Nurb surface, but it's got many more divisions, so it's not always the best way. You can see here that those divisions are starting to have an effect on the surface itself, whereas the Nurb surface is a much smoother looking surface with many less divisions on it. So there you have it. Loft, extrude, revolve and planar. 4 very useful tools, and a couple of extra things in there for you as well. Moving the pivot points and using the outliner. By the way, renaming things in the outliner, very simple to do. Double click and rename objects. So if you've been forgetting to rename stuff and you want to start getting a handle on it, the best thing to do is to go through your outliner, double click, and you can rename objects as you wish, and they will be renamed throughout. So the outliner, a really useful thing that you could make use of in the future. So